Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Kesubos Daf Mem Aleph. We begin right on top at the Mishnah. Ha'omer, this fellow gets up and declares as follows: I admit that Pitisi es bito shel Pliny. I was mefata, I seduced this fellow's daughter. So what happens? He has to pay. Mishalem boishes upagam al pi atzmei. So typically, by mefata, there are three payments. Standard 50 shkolim, which are knas, that's the fine aspect of the payment. Then on top of that we have boishes, shame and embarrassment that he brought about, and pagam, loss of value. So the penalty aspect, the 50 shekalim, that one cannot pay due to his own admission, as we're going to see in Rashi. But the boishes and pagam aspects of his obligation, that he can pay. That is called a momai, basic payment for bringing about loss of value, causing her shame. That's like a principle. It's just repaying for a damage, be it physical or emotional damage, that he brought about. So mishalem boishes and pagam al pi atzmei, he can pay boishes and pagam based on his own admission. Ve'ein mishalem knas, but the knas aspect he will not pay. Here comes another example. Ha'omer ganafti. A fellow gets up and says, look, I admit, I stole my friend's animal. Typically, a ganav pays double, pays twice. Keren, the actual principal, must be repaid as well as kefil, double payment. The principal is called mamain, basic payment. It's his basic monetary obligation that he can pay on his own. But the knas aspect, the double payment, the additional tashlumin, that's a penalty, which is not paid in this case. Ha'omer ganafti mishal mesaker, the keren, the actual repayment that he can do al pi atzmoi, due to his own admission, ve'ein mishalim tashlumei kefil, but not the double additional payment, v'tashlumei arboa v'chamisha, or the 4 and the 5, in the case where here he took the animal and shechted it or sold it. So if it's an ox, you pay 5. If it's a sheep, you pay 4. That extra additional payment he will not do. Another example is, hey, Miss Sheri es Pliny, my ox killed the other person, in which case he has to pay. Oy Sheri she Pliny, or kill the other fellow's ox. In both these cases, the payment is considered keren, is considered mamain, its actual value, its actual payment, and therefore harezim mishalem al pi atzmei, he pays due to his own admission. But hey, Miss Sheri, avdei shel Pliny, he admits that his share killed the other fellow's eved kanani, in which case the Torah mandates a payment of 30 shekalim, which are basically a set standard rate all throughout, irrespective of the actual value of the eved. So that's not reflective of value or loss of value. Rather, it's called a knas, and therefore ein mishalem al pi atzmei, he will not pay in this case. Ze'aklal, because we apply the following formula: kol mishalem yoser al mashe hizik. If a fellow is meant to pay more than he actually damaged, such as the kefil, the dal v'hei, or the chamishim shkolim by the oines and mefata, that's not commensurate to the actual damage. It's a set standard fee, more than the damage. Or likewise by the eved. He could have been a low value eved, not worth more than 1 penny. Torah obligates a payment of 30 shekalim. Apparently that's a knas, and therefore einoi mishalem al pi atzmei, that can be paid. That cannot be paid due to one's own personal admission. Let's go to Rashi on top. PTC. First case is, I was mefata. Why does the Gemara pick mefata? The Gemara mefarish amai leitana nasti. What happened to ma'anes? Why do we leave oines out? So this fellow pays the boishes of pagam, but not the knas aspect. Why? Ve'ein mishalem knas b'bavakama. Nafkalon, we learn from a pasuk, moide knas potav. If a person admits that he's chayiv knas, there's no payment. Me'asher yarshiyun elihim. The pasuk says that the elihim, the bezdin, the dayanim, who are actually smuchim, they will have smicha from their Rebbe to the Rebbe to the Rebbe, Moshe Rabbeinu. They have authority to obligate knas payments, prat lemarshia es atzmoi, as opposed to a fellow who is coming to offer that on his own. We don't accept it. Hey, mis sheri es pleni, very nichayev b'koifer. He killed the other fellow, and I must pay this koifer payment. Here is a mishalom pi atzmei because savar kofer mamoin. We're going with the shita that the koifer payment is considered mamoin, actual value. It's not considered a knas. Avdei pleni. Here it's different. Very nichayev shleish misela. I have to pay the 30. Ein mishalom de knas ninu. Shafilu ein yafel dinar. Noisin shleishim. Rashi brings a raya. A 30 for the Eved is a knas. The fact is, even if he's just worth 1 penny, 1 dinar, you pay 30. Apparently, it's unrelated to the actual value. It's a knas, and therefore you don't pay it al pi atzmi. Asks the Gemara, why do we begin with ha'omer pitisi? He seduced, he convinced. Velisni onasti. What happened to oines? Loimi bayika omar. Needless to say, it goes without saying that the same halacha applies by oines. Loimi bayika onasti. Of course, if he claims I forced her, the loika pogimla, in which case he's not really stigmatizing her that much, because it was a forced experience. In that case, we will accept his claim as fact and accept his payment. The mishalim boishes of pagam al pi atzmei. In that case, we accept the boishes and the pagam based on his admission, because he's not really stigmatizing her too much. Avol pitisi, but in a case where he claims that he convinced, he coerced her, in which case she somewhat consented to this experience. Dika pagama. If we trust him, if we believe him, if we take it as fact, what happens? She becomes severely socially stigmatized. Look, you are a willing partner in this type of activity. So perhaps in this case we shouldn't even believe him. I shouldn't accept his payment, even though he wants to rectify for what he did. Perhaps in this case, Bezdin would not allow this fellow to pay based on his own admission. You have no right to do teshuvah on the other person's at the other person's expense. So perhaps in this case he's not believed. Kamashmon, the bechiddush of the mission is yes, we accept payment from him, but it's not so simple. There are those who disagree. Mas nissen. In fact, this halacha of our Mishnah that we accept payment from a fellow who claims PTC, the loy kiai tana, disagrees with the following Tana, the Sandya. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, he says in the name of who? Mishum Rabbi Shimon, Av Paishas Pagam Einoi Mishal Mapi Atzmai. We do not accept Paishas Pagam from this fellow. Why? Because it's at her expense. Loi Kol Heimenu. He has no right, he has no ability, just because he's trying to do teshuvah, to go and step on the other person. Sheyiv Gaim Bita Shel Pliny, to stigmatize this fellow's daughter. He's claiming they did something with her, and therefore he has to pay? Too bad. We don't want to accept it as fact, because this will establish as fact that she was involved in this experience. He has no right to stigmatize her. It's like Rabbi Salanta with the Lashon Hara. You know, they ask Rabbi Salanta, what happens if a person speaks Lashon Hara? How does he do teshuvah? It's ben adam l'chaveru. You meant to go approach the person and appease him. Can I go to this person and say, look, you should know that I once spoke Lashon Hara about you in a shul. I would like to ask you for forgiveness. So B'Yisrael Salanta answered, no, of course not. Just because you want to do teshuvah, you're going to go inform this person that he was shamed and embarrassed in public? You have no right to do that. You're hurting him even more. Better leave it alone. Let it be unknown to him. And you find your way to have teshuvah elsewhere. You can ask him like a general, teshuvah, mechila, request. Be moichel for anything I may have done to you. You can't specify and make him feel bad just because you want your teshuvah. Here as well, says Rabbi Shimon, just because this perpetrator wants to pay up for what he did, he wants to fix, he wants to remedy this experience, you have no right to go and stigmatize her. Let's say she's okay with it. She'd rather take the money even at the expense of the stigmatization. What would be the halacha in that case? So Abaye said, no, well, that addresses her concerns, but remember, she's part of a family. Maybe her father is not happy about it. Next question was, let's say her father is okay with it. What about then? Maybe her family would be shamed and embarrassed. You can't do it on their expense. What about if the family is okay with it? What would you say then? Answer is, even then not. Why? It's impossible. There isn't somebody out there, some distant cousin, out in the distance, who would certainly be unhappy about this family member with a bad reputation. And therefore, you have no right to establish this as fact and embarrass somebody out there. So bottom line is, we have our Mishnah that certainly by the oinus, where she isn't severely stigmatized as much as by the mafata, certainly by the oinus he's believed, in order to allow him to pay the boishes and pagam, and by mafata as well. But there's a shita that disagrees, because we have no right to bring about shame and embarrassment upon her and her family. Okay, so Mishnah goes on with other examples of admitting to pay, admitting the chiyuv keren. One of them is a shar, fellow owns an animal, and this ox goes and damages. The Mishnah says, you can be mishalem al pi atzmai, the owner of that animal can go ahead and pay for those damages. Itma, we learned. Palga niska, what about the half damages that the Torah obligates in certain cases? You see, a shar, an ox, can bring about many forms of damage. There's something called shame. If he chews something, he eats something. That's conventional. It's just the way an animal behaves. If a fellow doesn't look after his animal, and doesn't keep him under wraps, and he goes and he damages by way of shame, by way of chewing and eating, the owner has to pay 100% of that damage. Likewise, regal, by way of just walking. That's just the way an animal behaves. He walks around, he tramples, he steps. Any damage is occurring due to regal would necessitate 100% payment by way of the owner. But then there's something called keren, horn, goring, something unconventional. It's not the typical behavior of an animal to go and gore and damage willingly. So if it happens once, twice, he's called a tam. Not yet habitualized. If he does it more than that, he's called a muad, an habitualized damager, an habitualized gorer and violent animal. In that case, certainly the owner has to pay 100% of damages. You should have watched over your animal. But what happens when he's still a tam? He's still relatively tame and innocent. Tam and tame. Still tame. Torah says the owner must pay for 50%, half the damages. Okay, so that's an established fact. There's no machlekes there. The question remains, how do we treat the 50% payment? Is it called mamain, actual payment for the actual damage? It's a rectification of the damage. In which case you can be moida, you can do it and pay it due to your own admission. Or is it called kinas? Is it a penalty, a fine? Something which you really shouldn't be paying because your animal is just tame and lame and you didn't really expect this to happen. You're not at fault. The Torah says you still have to pay. It's a knas. In which case, if you're moida b'knas, if you admit to this having happened, you're a pater. So which way is it? Machlokes amaroim. Itmar, palganiska. When the owner pays 50% damages due to the damage of his shor tam, of his tame animal. How do we view it? How do we treat it? Rapapa Amar palganiska mamoina. It's mamoin. It's plain basic repayment. Rav Huna ben Yeshua Amar, no, pal ganiska, that's knasa. It's a fine. And if you are maida, you can't just obligate yourself. It's a knas that needs to be imposed upon you by Bezdin. Explains the Gemara the background for this machlekes. Why would I say this? Why would I say that? Rav Papa Amar pal ganiska amayna, it's actual mummy. You're responsible. It makes sense. Because Rav Papa is working with the notion that stam shvorim la becheskas shimur kaimi. Typically, oxen are not presumed to be watched, so to speak. Meaning, an animal is an animal. You have to watch over it. You can't just assume that he won't damage. And therefore, when he goes then and wreaks havoc and damages and gores, ubedinu, really? The halacha should be the mishalam kulei, you pay 100%. But the Torah had compassion upon the owner. Because his shar had not yet exhibited habitualization, and therefore we give you a break. But whatever you do pay, even though we took it from 100% to 50%, whatever you do pay, that half, that 50% is mamay. It's something which is due to the victim. Rav Huna, Bereder Rishua Amar, he disagrees. Pal ganiska kanasa, it's a fine. It's not something which you should really have to pay at all. Because he's working with stam shvarim. Typically, animals are b'cheska shimur kaimi. They're presumed to be washed and safe and tame, unless you see that they've developed a violent streak. Otherwise, there's no reason why you should be choishish. You should suspect that your animal's going to go and damage. Ubedinu deloy l'shalim klal. Truthfully, you shouldn't be paying anything. V'rachmanu, the concept of the Torah adds a fine, kihechi, so that we encourage you, the ninter l'Torah, that he should look after his shur the next time around. Sort of a strong warning bell. But technically speaking, you're not really chayev for what happened. So bottom line is, if the shur is a muad, has already established himself as a habitual gorer, sure. The 100% payment there is mamay, something which you're chayiv min hadin. But until that point, when he's just a tam, and you pay 50%, one shita holds it's mamay, and one shita holds it's knas. We're going to have 4 attempts. The 4th one will be successful at bringing a raya to this discussion. Which way is it? Chatzi nezek of a tam, is it mammon, is it knas? Simon hizik ma vehem is klal. Tanan, we have a Mishnah in Bava Kama which says, hanizak, the victim of this nezek, the owner of the victimized shar, the one who incurred damage, v'hamazik, and the perpetrator, the owner of the animal who perpetrated the damage, both these fellows, bitashluman, and they participate. They sort of contribute to the damage. Which basically means, it sounds like it means, that just like the perpetrator has to pay, the nizak on the receiving end is also going to lose something somewhat. Because he's only getting 50% of his damage. Now, Bishlem Lamanda Amar, this works well according to the Shita that Palga Niska Mamoin, 50% that he pays is Mamoin. So the victim deserves that money. He really deserves 100%. But the Torah gives the mazik a discount, as we explained before. That explains the Mishnah. Hainu the Shayach Nizak B'Tashlumin. That explains why the Nizak is considered a participant. Because he's losing somewhat. He should be getting 100%, and he's only getting 50. But if you work with the other notion, it's from 0 to 50. Really, it should be 0, but we give him 50% knas. So the victim isn't really deserving of anything at this point. So why is he called a participant? Why is he considered one who is losing as well? Look, he's even getting something which he's undeserving of getting. He's getting 50%, which he doesn't really deserve. But you're telling me that he's actually paying, he's participating, he's losing something? He's not losing anything. He's all gain and no loss. Well, in Nitzracha, says the Gemara, the Mishnah there, must be speaking about a different aspect of the halacha, where in fact the nizak is losing something. We're speaking about the loss of value. experienced by the nevela, the carcass, that was at the receiving end of the violent animal. And the halacha is, the way Rashi explains it, the halacha is, if Reuven's shor kills Shimon's shor, which now turns into a nevela, any loss of value between now, moment of death, and until they go stand in Bezdin and work out the obligations, when they finalize the amount of payment that has to be paid. So between the moment of death and the moment of Ha'amada B'din, when they get up in Bezdin, they establish the facts and they necessitate payment, right? If the nevela goes down in value between one point and the other, the nizak is the one who has to look after that. He's the one that absorbs that loss. Perhaps he should have quickly jumped at it and gotten the nevela sold off. He shouldn't have waited till the bezdin got around to it. Whatever the reason is, we learned it from a pasuk. In any case, the nizak is somewhat contributing to the loss, because the mazik is not responsible for that drop in value. So that's what the Mishnah means. Hanizak v'mazik b'tashlumin. Just as the mazik has to pay at least 50% in the case of a tam, well, the nizak as well is also losing something, because all this loss of value experienced by his nevela is on his shoulders. Asks the Gemara, well, that halacha has already been taught elsewhere. Pchas nevela, the loss of value experienced by the nevela, tanina. It's been learned elsewhere in the Mishnah. Tashlumei nezik. Mishnah speaks about the tashlumei nezik. And the Gemara that asks, why does the Mishnah use such interesting language, tashlumei nezik, instead of just mishalmes hanezik? We learn that the Mishnah is trying to include this aspect as well. Malamed, we learn from here, Sha'abalim, the owner of the victimized and dead animal, they are metaplim the nevela. They have to look after their nevela, and any loss of value experienced is on their shoulders. So this halacha has been taught elsewhere. Why the repetition? The answer is they reflect different realities. Chada b'tam v'chada b'muad. The Mishnah mentions it once regarding a shor tam that was mazik, and one regarding a shor muad. Utzricha, and both are needed. There's an element present by one, unfound in the other one, and therefore each one is a chiddush. Di ashminan tam. If we only mention this halacha by the tam, that by the tam who was mazik, well, the nizak is responsible to look after the nevela. I would say, yeah, over there the perpetrator is not as responsible, because after all, his shor was not yet a muad. Aval muad, but if his shor was a real muad, perhaps in that case, it's all on the mazik's shoulders. V'yashmina muad. On the other hand, if we only mention the muad, I would say over there, the nizak has to look after the nevela mishum dekom mishalem kulei. After all, the mazik is paying 100%. That's enough. So let the nizak look after the nevela. Aval tam and by a tam where he's only paying 50%, perhaps he should look after the nevela as well. Don't throw it on the nizak. Tzricha. That's why the Mishnah mentions it twice, one for tam, one for muad. The halacha remains the same, irrespective of whether the shor was a tam or a muad. The nizak has to look after the nevela. Toshma, here comes another raya to our question. Again, what was the question? When a shor is mazik, a shor tam is mazik, and the owner pays 50%, how do we define that payment? Is it mamain or is it knas? Toshma, here comes a raya. The Gemara Bava Kama asks the question, what's the difference between tam and muad? How many differences can we find? Ma bin tam l'muad. We find two differences. Number one, sha'atam mishalem chatzi nezik. A tam only pays 50%, and mi gufa, from himself, which is just a way of saying it's based on the value of the perpetrator shor. Meaning, if the animal that brought about the hezek is worth $100, the owner would never pay more than $100. So he pays 50% of the damages, provided it does not exceed the value of his shor. That's the halacha. So we have two aspects found by tam, not found by muad. Umuad mishalem nezek shalom, as opposed to a muad it's 100% payment, and also min aliyah, from his best properties, unrelated to the value of the damager. Okay, so that's the Allah. Two differences. V'loik tani, and the Brisa makes no mention of the following difference. Shatam eine mishal al pi atzmai. The half payment of the tam will not be paid out by one's own admission, because it's a knas. Umud mishal al pi atzmai, as opposed to the 100% payment of the mud, which can be paid due to one's admission. Why doesn't the Brisa mention that difference? Apparently, because it's not a difference. Just as the 100% of mud is mammon, likewise the 50% of tam is mammon. That's a right to the shita, the chatzi niska mamayna. Answers the Gemara, perhaps not. Tana is shir, although the Tana mentioned some differences between tam and mud, but perhaps left out this difference. My shir, what else did the Tana leave out? Which would indicate that it's an incomplete list. Dai shir, and explain why he left out this one as well. I'll give you something that he left out. Shir chatzi kaifer. Very simple. There's another difference. If a mud animal kills a person, the owner has to pay full kaifer, the value of that victim. Whereas, if his animal is just a tam, he's completely exempt from kaifer. And the Rashi brings the pasuk, balashar naki, there's no kaifer. There he goes, another difference, which the Brisa left out. No, that's not a difference. If only from that halacha, lav shirhu, that would not be considered an omission. Because actually, Hamani, Rabbi Yitzhak Lili, perhaps this Brisa is in line with Shitas Rabbi Yitzhak Lili, the Amar Tam Shalom Chatzi Kaifer, who in fact learns the pasuk differently. That just as Muad, who kills, pays 100% kaifer, Tam, who kills, pays 50% kaifer. So regarding this halacha, they're totally equal. It's consistent with their regular damage payment, 50%, 100%. There's no additional distinction between Tam and Muad regarding kaifer. So bottom line is, we don't really have a raya from this Brisa pertaining to our question. Tashma, here comes another raya. A raya which is based on our Mishnah. Tashma, Heimi is Shayri es Pliny. An owner gets up and admits, my shar killed the other Jew. Oy Shayri Shaplini, or he killed the other fellow's ox. Hareza Mishal Pi Atzmoy. So you can pay due to his own admission. That's the Mishnah. Maila betam, apparently was speaking even by a tam. It was his first experience, his first damage. And the Mishnah says, he can issue payment. He's chayiv to pay. Isn't that a raya that the 50% payment of a tam is mamay? Otherwise, he wouldn't pay. Moed b'knas would be pater. Loi, no, b'mod. We're speaking about a habitual gorer, in which case the payment is certainly mamay. And therefore, he can pay it on his own. Aval betam. But what are you going to tell me? Should he have been a tam? What would happen? He wouldn't pay on his own because it's a knas. If that's so, then I have a kash. Adatoni sefer. So why at the end of the Mishnah, when the Mishnah is looking for a case where it's knas, we have to go find a case where his shar killed an eved. Avdei shaploini, my shar killed the other fellow slave. That 30 shekal in payment is a knas, and therefore Eina Mishal Pi Atzmai, he can't pay on his own. Why'd you have to go to the Eved to find the case of knas? You could have found that halacha within a shar damaging another shar. It all depends what the shar was. If he was a muad, that's mamay. But if he was a tam, then it's knas. If indeed the 50% payment of a tam is a knas. We could have found a distinction within hitting an animal. When does he pay? If it's a muad, which is mamay. Aval tam, but if it's just a tam and it's knas, he can't pay due to his own admission. Answer is kula b'muad kamairi. Instead of shifting around from muad to tam, the Mishnah wanted to stick to a muad, and therefore we had to find a case of muad being potter, muad being a knas, and we went over to the Eved. So bottom line is, we don't really have a conclusion now on our question. But here comes a conclusion. Tashma. At the end of our Mishnah, we have the following formula. Zaklal. This is the rule. A fellow is meant to pay more than he actually damaged. that cannot be paid due to his own admission. That's a knas. Right? Let's make a diuk. Apparently, if it's less than what he actually did, such as the 50% that a tam would pay, that he would pay on his own. There you go. A clear Mishnah that the tashlumin of a tam is considered moment. The answer is no. Instead of saying that if it would be less than the actual damage, that's moment, and that he pays on his own, don't make that diuk. Ella ema, rather say like this. The Mishnah says, whenever one is meant to pay more than what he did, that's knas. And let's make a diuk. Apparently, if it's exactly how much he did, the payment equals the actual damage, in that case, it's mamin mishal piatzmai. He'll pay on his own. But if it's less, who's speaking about less? Right? The Mishnah says, if it's more, then that's a penalty. But if it's exactly as much as he did, that's mamin. But perhaps if it would be less than what he did, that's back to knas. Aval pachais mai, but if it's less than what he actually did, like the tam paying 50%, mai, what would be halacha? Eidem mishal piatzmai. Do you mean to say in that case he would not pay on his own because that's a knas? I'm just following your train of thought. Is that what you mean to say? If that were so, then why did the Mishnah have to formulate the formula in this manner? It's sort of like a negative. If you pay more, you pay different than what you did, right? Then it's a knas. But if it's exactly how much you did, then it's mammon. But if it's less than what you did, then it's back to knas. It's a little bit complicated. The Mishnah could have presented it in a more, like in a positive sense. Listening, the Mishnah could have simply said like this. Simple and uncomplicated. If it were so, that what you're saying is true, that unless it's the actual amount of the hezek, the actual is mammon, anything more or less would be knas, then shouldn't have the Mishnah better said like this? Listening, zakal, this is the rule. Whoever does not pay, whoever's payment does not reflect the actual hezek, meaning he's paying either more or less, that's not the moment. That he would not pay on his own. That's a clear-cut formula. The mashma pacha, it's a mashma yasser. Includes less, includes more. Just say it straight out. If you pay exactly what you did, is the tashlumin equals the nezek, that's moment. Otherwise not. So by default, you know, if it's more, it's not. If it's less, it's not. Tiyuft. In fact, this is a rock-solid refutation. You cannot say that chatzi nezek is knas. Rather, it's mammon. And that's what the Mishnah says. Look, if you pay more than what you did, like 30 shkalim for the evet was worth very little, or in the case of the oynis, you pay 50 shkalim, which is unrelated to the actual nezek there. All these are forms of fines, of knasais, which you don't pay on your own. But if it's actual payment for actual hezek, or if it's less, like the 50% of the sheratam, that's mammon. But, says the Gemara, the actual halacha is that palga niska, the 50% that the tam would pay, is considered a knasa. It is a fine. What's going on here? To Yufta, first you refuted it based on a diuk in the Mishnah. You've proven that it's mammon. It can't be knas, it's mammon. And then you say that the halacha l'masa is that it's a knas. How does this work? Incorrect. 100%. Time of my Tosef. How did you refute this notion? It was based on a diuk in the Mishnah, right? Mishum de Tani, Kama Shehizik. Because you had a question. Why didn't the Mishnah just simply say, if payment equals the hezek, that's mammon, otherwise it's knas, which would indicate that less than 100% is knas. Why didn't the Mishnah just say it like that? That was your question. The answer is, you know why? Because although generally speaking, paying more than the actual hezek, or even paying less than the actual hezek, is in fact a knas. But there is one exception. There's one case where actually paying less than what you did is considered mammon. And therefore the Mishnah did not want to mislead us into thinking otherwise. And therefore the Mishnah avoided any language that would indicate, as such, that paying less than the actual hezek is knas, because there is one exception to the rule. Therefore, the Mishnah kept away from it. But it's not to say that typically chatzi nezek is knas. What's that one exception? It's as follows: Loi psikale. It wasn't a clear-cut rule to the Tana of the Mishnah, and therefore he did not want to mislead us. There's one exception to the rule. Kivan the ika chatzi nezek tzroiros is halacha that if a shur is just walking along, no complaints there, just walking along, and he sprays some pebbles as he's walking along. So unbeknown to him, there are pebbles being sprayed about. Those pebbles go ahead and damage the other person's belongings. So that's tzroiros, pebbles that shoot out from between his legs. In that case, the Gemara Bava Kama teaches us, based on halacha Moshe Sinai, that although typically any damage resulting from the animal walking around, that's called regel, that's just ordinary behavior, which the owner should look after and should guard for. Although that type of hezek is called mammon, which necessitates 100% payment, but if it happened by way of a medium, of a tzroiros, a pebble flying, that's not a direct nezek, and that goes down to 50%. Chasi nezek tzroiros, the hilchas ha-gemirla, that's learned by the way of halacha Moshe Sinai de mamaynahu. That although it's 50%, it's different than the other 50% of the shar tam who's goring, and here it's mammon, it's actual payment. It's rightful payment. It's not knas. So here we have an example. We have a case where it's 50% payment because of the indirectness aspect of it, but ultimately it's mammon. So in order to avoid any misunderstanding, that's why the Mishnah did not choose wording which would indicate that if it's less than 100%, it's knas. Lest we misunderstand and misapply it to this case as well. But it's not to say that typically 50% payment is in fact a knas. Like in the case of the Karen, where he willingly damaged. But since he was just a tam, and it's 50%, over there, in fact, it is a knas, and therefore, when he is moide b'knas, he's pater. Now that you have established and confirmed that, in fact, half payment is a knas, and the halacha is that who has the authority to impose a knas? Rashi brought the pasuk in Amud Aleph, Asher Yarshion Elohim, which is a lashon referring to the bezdin who are semuchim, they have smicha. We mean the real smicha. Going back all the way to Moshe Rabbeinu. And Rashi brings that was only in Eretz Yisrael and Bavel. They didn't have this idea of smicha as the kenim. So these Dayanim and Bavel are not expert enough. They're not authorized to activate a knas. Therefore, says the Gemara, V'asha the Amars Palganiska knas. Now we learned that the damage brought about by an animal when he is still in a state of tam is a knas, and therefore high kaba. If you have a dog, you own a dog, the achal imri, who devoured sheep alive. That's something unusual. It's unconventional. That falls under the category of keren, damages. Or v'shunra, you have a cat, the achal tarnagoli, who devoured chickens. So if they're ravarvi, if they're large-sized chickens, mishunuhu, that's something unusual. And that falls under the category of keren. Remember, we have three categories: keren, shein, and regel. Right? Regel is walking about. That's urchi. That's just ordinary behavior. Likewise, shein, devouring, eating, having a meal. That's just the way an animal behaves. You pay 100% damages there. But if it's something unconventional, something that deviates from the norm, something which indicates an expression of violence, that falls under the category of Keren, where we differentiate between first and second time, where it's just a tam and it's 50%. I couldn't have known better, I shouldn't have looked after him, I didn't know he was a violent fellow. As opposed to a habitualized violent animal where it's 100%. So in these cases, it's mishun, it's unusual, and therefore the first and second time, it's called chatzi nezek, knas, mishunahu v'le magbinim b'bavel. We can't collect this money in bavel, we don't have the authority to do so, aval zutri, but if it's regarding small-sized chickens, urchiyu, that's considered ordinary behavior, umagbinan, and if he kills those chickens, it's considered mamayin, that's considered shein v'regel, and actually it's shein, it's just a derivative of shein, and therefore the payment in that case is a rightful payment, it's mamayin, because that's what an animal does. He uses his shein to his tooth to eat, umagbinan, and we collect it even above. Now, when in fact it is a knas, where we can't obligate payment in bavel, but v'tafas, if the victim grabbed the perpetrator's property, we can't extract it from him, we can just hold on to it, it's his. And Taisus learns, this is specific to being teifes the mazik, meaning he grabbed the actual animal, but doesn't refer to grabbing any other assets belonging to the owner of that animal. Let's say the victim says, look, I know here in Bavel we can't do much about it, but I want you, Dayanim, to compel the owner of the animal to come with me to Eretz Yisrael, to set an appointment in Eretz Yisrael with the Dayanim in Eretz Yisrael who will deal with it. In fact, we arrange this for him. If the owner refuses to go along and cooperate, we put him into Cherem, we force him to do so. Either way, whether he goes or doesn't go, whether the nizak insists on going or not, doesn't matter. We force him to get rid of the animal. We put him into cherem until he looks after the violent animal. We tell him, get rid of the violent animal. The son of Rabbi 9. How do we know? How do we know that person is not meant to raise a violent dog in his home? Likewise, the person is not meant to use a shaky ladder. A person is not meant to present danger in his home. Not meant to present danger in one's home. Says the Mishnah, Nara and its patisa. If a Nara experienced a pitui encounter with a man, Boishta upgama uknasa shalavia. In which case the perpetrator pays 3 different payments. Knas, the 50 shkal, standard fee. Boishas, the shame and embarrassment that he brought about. Upgama, due to the loss of value. All that goes to the father, as the pasuk says. They give it to the father. Vatzar betfusa, if she was tfusa, if she was grabbed, meaning it was a violent encounter, it was an oinus, a forced encounter, then we add the tsar due to pain and discomfort brought about. So typically, these payments go to the father, if she is a nara. Let's say she took him to court. The Mepharshim say doesn't necessarily mean she has to grab the guy and go to court. It means to say that the Bezdin attended this matter, which resulted from her being victimized. In any case, they took the perpetrator to court and they issued a verdict, a Gemar din. And this all happened before father passed away. And now he passed away. Before the fellow actually issued payment. Hari and Shalav, here as well. It goes to the father. Mesav, and therefore when the father died, Hari and Shalachin, it goes down to his kids. They are Yerush, they inherit this payment as well. Because after the Gemar Din was issued, this money sort of belongs to the father. We look at it as though the father sort of attained possession. He got that payment. It became his zechus, his interest, in which case, when he passed away, it goes down to the brothers, to his children. But lo yispik olamad b'din achemei sa'av. Suppose father passed away before they got a chance to issue the verdict. In this case, payment goes directly to her. So although father's properties go down to his children, but this payment was never really internalized by the father until the Gemar Din. And since he passed away before Gemar Din, she gets payment. A similar halacha applies to if she turned into adult. She became a begeres, which is 6 months into adulthood. There was a Gemar Din before she became a begeres, Harein Shalav. Money belongs to the father. Meisav, if father passed away at this point, even before he got a chance to collect on his claim, Harein Shalachin, it goes over to his children, the brothers of this Isha. But lo yispeak alamad bedinat shepagra. Suppose she was a begeres before they got a chance to drag him to Bezdin and issue the verdict. So now once she's a begeres, she leaves her father's domain, so to speak, and therefore, Harein Shal Atzma, she receives these payments. So according to Tanakama, it all depends on the Gemar Din. If the Gemar Din occurs before father passes away, or in the case of a begeres, before she became a begeres, the money goes to the father. Rabbi Shimon Omer, no, it depends on collection. That's the criterion. If she didn't get a chance to collect on the payment before father passed away, her father never actually got a hold of that money, Harein Shel Atzma. So now when father passes away, she gets payment. And the Mishnah concludes, Masi Yodea Umetziasa, the earnings of this Nara, or her findings, things that she finds in the street, typically these go to her father. Even if she didn't actually collect her earnings yet, but it's due to her, it's owing to her. And then Mesav, father passed away. Is it considered to have come to him or not? Yes. You see, earnings are different than the payments of the Oynes and Mafata. Here it's really coming to her. She worked for it. It's not something that Bezdin has to, apply and activate. So in this case, it's as though father already received that money, and when he passes away, even before he actually collected it, if he passed away, Harein Shel Achen, now the brothers get rights to those earnings. Okay, let's do a brief chazar of today's daf. Today's daf revolved around the concepts of mammon and knas. Sometimes a payment is considered mammon when it relates to the actual obligation, the actual damage, for instance, and that a person can obligate himself. Al pi atzma. You don't need bezdin for that. Examples of mammon are the baishas and pagam in the case of an oynes and mafata. Actually, Rabbi Shimon holds that baishas and pagam we do not accept from him because it's going to stigmatize the victims. That's a side point. Other examples of mammon is keren. He steals, you have to repay. Or the nezek shalim, the full payment of full damages, typically applied when the animal devours, the animal steps on something, or in the case of a gorer, when he's habitualized. We have one exception, which is the tzroi race. Over there, even though it's coming through regal, but it's 50%, and it's considered mammon. What are examples of knas, which a person cannot obligate himself, because the pasuk says, Asher yarashiyun aleihim, only the Bezdin has the authority to impose knas. Yeah, for instance, the 50 shkalim of the Enes Mafata, 30 shkalim for the Eved who was killed by the Shur. And according to the Maskon of the Gemara, the Chatzi Nezek paid by the Shur Tam that was Mazik. This isn't something which you can be Machayiv yourself. Rather, you need a Bezdin Smuchim and Eretz Yisrael. Then we went on to the Mishnah regarding these payments of Baishas, of Bagam, etc. According to Tanakama, these belong to the father, if in fact there was a Gemar Din issued before he passed away, and likewise before she became a Begeres. In that case, it's owing to the father and can be transferred to his sons if and when he passes away. According to Rabbi Shimon, the criterion is different. It depends on the point of collection. All the best to you and much hatzlach.